Hello, students. Good evening. Today's session is on ethics, and today we're going to discuss one of the most important aspects of your mains exam. It is about the ethical case laws or ethics or case studies in ethics. According to me, these case studies are your gold mine because it is so very easy to score in them. You actually should know the right approach. If you know the right approach, it is so very easy to score in the case studies. Now, let's begin with understanding in this session. I'm going to basically tell you the approach to case studies. How do you approach them? What should be the method? And before that, we will first discuss about ethical dilemmas. I'll also give you a very important case, a very sensitive case that was in news way back when the Supreme Court judgment has come. As a example, this is a case that I've taken myself. So let's talk about this. Let's begin with understanding what is an ethical dilemma. Now, what is a dilemma? What is a situation? Dilemma is a situation where you have two options and you don't know which one to choose. You have two options. Both options seem right. Okay. They seem right, and both options have their own advantages and disadvantages. So you're confused, you don't know which one to choose. That is a dilemma. Then what is an ethical dilemma? Ethical dilemma is a situation where when you are confronted with two options which are ethically right, morally right. So it is a dilemma between right versus right. Both options are right. You know that both the options are right, and you're in a confusion. You don't know which one to choose. This is called as an ethical dilemma. A few examples is where you are confronted with one side, you have to be honest versus loyalty. Imagine when I was very young, one of my close friends had helped me. And because of her help, I cracked the exam. I became an officer. But however, that friend's time went very bad. And today she is actually looking for a job. She's applied for a government job at a lower level, and I am the recruiting officer. One word from me, if I favor her in the interview, she will get the job. For all that she has done to me, I have to be very loyal. I have to repay her debt. Okay, personal front, but I have to recruit the right person for the right job. I cannot favor anybody. So, honesty, one side, your job, honesty, public interest, and the other side, loyalty. Then you have empathy. This is a very common example. If you are implementing a scheme, you come across a very old woman, or you're implementing a scheme for housing. Okay, you come across a very old woman. A very mere glance of that woman, you can make out that she is very desperate. She needs the scheme more badly than anybody else. But unfortunately, she does not have the required documents. Objectivity says you have to have the documents, only then you can proceed further and enroll her in the scheme. She can become a beneficiary. But your empathy says that she is the most deserving person for the scheme. So how do you manage such a situation? Again, you today's case, which I'm going to discuss, is a perfect example of public duty. It's a conflict of interest situation versus public interest. Your duty, your official duty versus public interest. One side you're bound by your duty, but the public at large are against it. For example, you have situations like you have to clear a slum. Okay, a slum where you have thousands of people living. They don't want to leave. Your official duty says clear it, but you have to also. But there is a severe public backlash or environment concerns. You have to clear a forest area for a developmental project or for a nuclear project or for a science related project. Environmentalists, public at large, are against it. Your official duty says that you have to clear it. So these kind of situations, we call them as ethical dilemmas. Now, in these situations, how do you go forward? What should be the approach? Approach for all case studies, usually we say is you should have a very brief intro where you highlight the ethical dilemma. The most important dilemma within the case you have to highlight. Okay, followed by you have to identify the stakeholders who will be affected. The reason why you have to identify, I know everybody would tell you the same thing, but I'll tell you why you should do it. Intro, where you identify the key problem, will tell the examiner that you have clearly understood where the dilemma lies. Stakeholders are important because every decision you make, every option that you talk about, it will have an impact on all the stakeholders. So you should be able to, for you to give a 360-degree view of how your options, each option is going to impact everybody. You should first know who will be impacted. So identifying stakeholders is very, very important. Then you have to identify what are the main issues in that. Where do you see a conflict, or where do you see a problem? What is against what? So what are the main issues that you have to manage? Is public order at stake? Are you is it a situation where you find it difficult to uphold rule of law or constitutional morality? Is it a situation where your integrity is at stake, or your personal interest is at stake? So you should be able to identify the issues, followed by the values at stake. Values, basically, you identify those values. For example, integrity, objectivity, impartiality. These are values. So which what values of civil services or public services are at stake? Then you give your options. When you give your options, for every option, please remember, options should not be illegal. Options should not be extreme. Okay, the option should be to the maximum possible extent practical. Option should be where you feel how this can also be done, kind of options. And you have to, for each option, you have to identify the advantage and disadvantage, meaning what could be the pro and what could be the con. Okay, and then you have to make your choice. What is your choice? And you have to explain why. This why should actually help you to conclude. In some situations, they'll also ask you, what long term measures will you suggest? In some cases, they'll ask you, what should you do in the long run to avoid such a situation? So how do you avoid such a problem? How do you ensure that this does not repeat? What long term measures will you take so that this problem reduces and eventually fades out? So these things also will be asked. So the last part of the your case study answer will totally depend on the questions that are being asked. But otherwise, this is the approach. Now, this is a case that I have very personally, closely known. So I wanted to take this case, a very sensitive case, because this will also help me to explain how important it is to understand the relationship between rule of law and customs. Now, this is after the Shabarimala case. I'm sure you all know about the Shabarimala case. Supreme Court's judgment allowing women between 10 to 50 years to enter the temple. And it actually, the judgment was severely criticized by public. There were massive protests all over Kerala. Ayyappa Swami devotees were protesting and all that. In this backdrop, there were two women who wanted to enter the temple, and the officer, a senior police officer, was designated to carefully take the women into the temple, ensure their safety, get them out of the temple, and ensure that the darshan is done. Now, that police officer personally was a very adherent devotee of Lord Ayappa, and he totally believed in this age old custom. So, for him, it was going against his own personal belief. Coupled with, there was severe public outrage on these two women entering the temple. Okay, now let's look at the case. Reading the case is also very important because you have to read between the lines. You are a senior police officer posted in Kerala following a landmark Supreme Court judgment allowing the entry of women of all ages into the Shabarimala temple. You have been assigned the responsibility to ensure the safe passage of two women devotees who wish to enter the temple. However, you are also a devout follower of Lord Ayappa. Okay, so your personal belief is at stake. You are a follower and you believe that women should not enter. You're deeply conflicted. The law requires you to facilitate their entry, but your personal faith views it as a violation of a sacred tradition. Adding to the complexity, there are massive protests around the temple with emotionally charged devotees staging roadblocks, raising slogans, and warning of unrest if the women are allowed entry. Now, what do you do in such a situation? How do you handle this situation? This is the case. I have framed a very simple case because this is my first session on cases. I did not want to complicate. Now, the basic dilemma, if you read it, there are three aspects in it. The first para talks about the Supreme Court judgment. Okay. And this Supreme Court judgment is telling you that your official duty as a police officer is to accompany these women and ensure their safe passage. Versus the second para talks about your own personal belief, personal faith or belief, which tells that this is not right, versus there is a massive public interest. Okay, so your personal belief and public interest are at one side. Okay. And your official duty based out on the Supreme Court judgment is on the other side. So, official duty versus personal belief plus public interest. Now, how do you handle this situation? This dilemma should be actually given in your introduction. Then we have to talk about the stakeholders. Now, who are the stakeholders? Let's identify the stakeholders. The court has given the judgment. First, it is the court, Supreme Court, that has given the judgment. You, as the officer, the two women who wanted to enter the temple. Okay. Then you have the Shabarimala temple board. Okay. Because the actual scene where all this is going to happen is that. Then you have public, basically, you have a lot of massive protests by devotees. Okay, so devotees are stakeholders and public are also a stakeholder because any rupture in these protests will disturb law and order. The state government is another stakeholder because it is going to implement the order. So Supreme Court because of its judgment, the state government because it is responsible to implement the order, and that is the reason why you got the duty. So you, the two women who want to enter, the devotees, the temple board, most importantly public at large, because any disturbance will disturb the public order. It might lead to massive violence, and the public order and law and order will go for a ride. So these are the stakeholders. Now coming to values, what values are at stake? Supreme Court judgment basically talks about the See, let's identify the dilemmas first, then I'll talk about the values. What are the dilemmas here? First dilemma, as I said, you have a personal belief. This personal belief plus public interest together are against your official duty. So, this is the first dilemma. Okay, this anyways we've identified in our intro, but apart from this, what else are there? See, one side you have a rule of law. Okay, what the court has said. Court has upheld the law. How I'm going to tell you. Rule of law versus you have customs and traditions. Basically, you have the freedom of religion. Okay. Now, in the name of freedom of religion, can you restrict women's entry? Is one. One point is that then you have one side, you have public interest. Okay. Versus the other side, you have um, gender equality, I can say, because you're allowing women also to enter the temple. So, one side you're talking about women who want to enter this temple, but them entering the temple can violate public order, and people at large are against their entry. So, should you go by the majoritarianism or should you allow the rule of law to prevail? Basically, it is a conflict between rule of law and freedom of religion. Now, what are the values at stake? The first value which is at stake is objectivity. Okay, because your objectivity, see, basically, objectivity is a value which is based on the premise that you have to take decisions on the basis of evidence and not on the basis of emotions. Okay, your objectivity should be in line with what the court is saying. Fine. But objectivity is facing a conflict here because your objectivity is facing a conflict versus your own emotions and belief. Okay, so objectivity is at stake. The second is you have to be impartial, irrespective of what is your personal opinion. They're supposed to be impartial, and you have to protect the women. The third important value that is at stake is constitutional morality. Constitutional morality is a idea where we talk about the values of the constitution being upheld under any given circumstances. Constitutional morality is equally applicable to public, to the state, to the officers of the government. Everybody is bound by constitutional morality. Morals are that sense of right and wrong that every individual has. And this sense of right and wrong, if you derive from the values given in the Constitution, this is called as constitutional morality. For example, how should I treat my fellow human beings? I should treat them with dignity, because Constitution preamble says dignity of individual is of paramount importance. So my constitutional values tell me that I have to treat every individual around me with dignity. I have to treat others the way I treat myself. So equality should be there. This is how you have to base your conduct, your decision, your judgment on the values that are given in the Constitution. That is constitutional morality. Undoubtedly, in this situation, the constitutional morality is at stake. Now, what are the options you have? Before that, I'll explain the judgment. See, basically, one side you have a custom, and the other side you have rule of law. Rule of law is a concept where we say that law is supreme and cannot be compromised for anybody. According to the constitution, you can compromise. You see, whenever it comes to religion, religious belief or religious custom versus right, constitution says only if the custom is mandatory, only if it is an essential practice of religion, you can compromise the right for the custom. For example, reciting the namaz is an essential practice of Islam. So, if at all there is a conflict between reciting namaz and any other right, reciting namaz will be given more importance than the right. However, there are many things that happen in different religions which are not compulsory, and they violate the fundamental rights. For example, untouchability, which is rooted in caste system, which comes from the religion. Untouchability is not compulsory, because early Vedic period we never had this practice of untouchability. So Supreme Court said that untouchability is not an essential practice of Hinduism. Likewise, triple talaq is not an essential practice of Hinduism. Now, coming to this debate, are women allowed into temples? Answer is yes. Are women allowed into Ayyappa Swami temples? The answer is yes, except for Shabarimala. Everywhere else they are allowed. Were women ever allowed into Ayyappa Swami temple? History says women were allowed before into the Ayyappa Swami temple in Shabarimala. Okay. Is Ayyappa Swami temple a government entity, or is it a religious denomination? Was the next question raised. It is not a religious denomination because it is run by the state government, a temple board constituted by the state government. Now, the Supreme Court was asked, do women in the age of 10 to 50 have the right to enter the temple? Supreme Court purely based on what the law says. Law says yes, because you cannot have any discrimination on the basis of sex. And this particular discrimination is based out on sex because it is related to a woman's menstrual cycle. So that is the reason why Supreme Court said yes, women can enter. But you have to remember, in quotes, disclaimer, please understand that if you ask me what is my personal choice, would I like to go? I would not prefer going, because that is my belief. I fall into that age. I would definitely not go. I would not step into Shabarimala because my belief says that I should not go. Okay. Supreme Court has said women can go. Supreme Court did not impose a compulsion on women to go. Now it is for us women, our belief system, whether we want to go or not to go. And trust me, majority of women would not prefer going in because of their belief system. So you have to understand, that is how you look at it objectively without attaching any emotions. I'm also a very strong believer. I'm an adherent devotee, but I would never step in. And I respect Supreme Court's judgment because I understand that it has upheld the rule of law. So this is how you understand the judgment. Now, this sense of clarity will give you what option should be your final choice. Going by the options, if you give importance to now the options that the officer has here is, if he gives importance to his religious belief, then the first option is he will adhere to his belief and he will simply say reject or refuse to go on duty. This will amount to dereliction of duty. What is dereliction of duty? Dereliction of duty is where you uh, reject to do your duty. That is dereliction of duty. So that it will amount to dereliction of duty, but your personal belief is preserved. You company women, but you're not very careful about their security and all that. This is a bigger crime because neither the women are safe nor the public are safe. It can lead to any kind of conflict. The third is where you take up your duty, you strictly adhere to what you're asked to perform. You ensure that the women are safely get a safe passage. You coordinate with the intelligence, the department, ensure a safe passage with the women for the women without disturbing the public order, ensuring that there is minimal disturbance or absolutely no disturbance to general public. So these are the three options. You should go with the third option because one, Supreme Court rule is binding. Supreme Court judgments are binding. Okay. Rule of law. You have to follow the law. If you, as an officer, don't follow, nobody else will follow. As an officer, your first duty is to follow the rule. So, rule of law in this situation, Supreme Court's judgment is binding. You cannot go against the Supreme Court judgment. Second, you have to use objectivity. The court has upheld the law. You cannot allow your emotions to play a role there. Okay. Third, you have to respect the choice of these two women to enter the temple. It is their choice to enter, and they have the right. They are entitled to their choice. So, and four, you have to ensure the safety of public by coordinating with various departments to ensure that there is no the protests don't go out of control. So, this is how you have to conclude, saying that this is my choice because Supreme Court judgments have to be respected. Supreme Court judgment is binding. They have upheld the rule of law. Constitutional morality says that there should be equality. Women also are entitled to their belief system. So if these two women wanted to enter, it is their belief system. So this is how you have to look at the case studies. The first session, so I've taken a very simple case, but I've taken a real-time example. You'll come across a number of such examples. I will not be surprised if this year we have a case on the international scenario which is happening unfolding worldwide. So a lot of cases, lot of dilemmas you pick up from your newspaper when you read your newspaper very carefully, reading between the lines. There's a lot that comes in news on ethics. So this is about ethical dilemmas and how you should approach. Hope this session was useful to you. I'll see you again on Monday with a new topic on Indian politics. Thank you. Bye bye.